Mr. Griffith, are you ready?
Yes, I was just trying to read that new case.
We'll discuss it more, but I think the statutes have kind of resolved anything regarding our case, but we'll talk about it in more detail. I don't think initially it changes anything about our case. But anyway, we'll address that later. So let's bring the jury in, please. All right, jury's back. Please be seated. Ms. Jensen, you may proceed.
Mr. Griffith asked you how many cigarette butts were in the trash can outside, and what was your answer?
I believe I told him 4.
No, the trash can outside.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. And he asked you about the cigarette butts in the trash can in the house, and what was your response?
4.
Okay. And have you thought about it?
Yes.
And how many were there?
There was 4 near the bottom and 1 on top, a
Okay.
total of 5.
Okay. Now, Mr. Griffith was asking you about the log lists and people coming in and out of the scene. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do the medical examiner's office and the body removal people, do they keep their own reports of dates and times?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And then does crime scene keep reports of when they go to the scene?
Yes,
So all that is documented, is it not?
it is.
Okay. Mr. Griffith also asked you about the cars in the driveway being searched. Do you remember that line of questioning?
Yes.
Okay. And when crime scene and investigators searched the tan car and the white car, did you see any money in either one?
No.
And I think you testified that the scene was released 5 to 7 days after July 31st, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So after that, was there a deputy posted there?
No.
Could anyone go on the property?
Yes.
Could the defendant go on the property?
Yes.
Do you know who had access to either of those cars after the sheriff's office released the scene?
No.
I want to talk briefly about GSR. Do you know what the outer limits are for testing for GSR?
As far as like on your hands?
Well, anywhere.
Yes.
Okay, and what is the outer limit? What's the time frame that you should test for GSR?
6 to 8 hours.
And do you know if someone washes their hands, does that affect GSR?
Yes.
If someone takes a shower, does that affect GSR?
Yes.
If someone changes their clothes, does that affect GSR?
Yes.
If they wash their clothes, does that affect GSR?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what Donald Hartung was wearing on July 28th of 2015?
No.
Now, Mr. Griffith talked to you about the search warrant at Mr. Hartung's house, I believe on August 3rd.
That's correct.
Okay. And he was saying that there was nothing there linking him to the homicides, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you didn't recover a gun at Donald Hartung's house, did you?
No.
Does that mean that Richard Smith wasn't shot?
No.
And you don't know which knife was used. Does that mean the 3 victims didn't have their throats slit?
Correct.
Okay. And the search warrant was how many days after the murders are believed to be committed?
4.
Do you have any idea what Mr. Hartung was doing between the details between July 28th, July 28th and July 31st of 2015?
Can you say that again?
Do you have any details? Do you know what Donald Hartung was doing between July 28th of 2015 and July 31st?
No.
Do you know what he was doing between July 31st and the time that the search warrant was executed?
No.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
All right, you can step down, sir. State, call your next witness, please.
State calls Chris Williams.
Good afternoon. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you state your full name, please?
Christopher A. Williams,
And where are you employed?
the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
What are your current duties?
I'm the Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Chief of Investigations for the Pensacola region, and I'm the Director of the Northwest Florida Fusion Center.
Okay. What were your duties in July, August, September 2015?
I was a Special Agent, still at FDLE, and I was assigned to the Electronic Surveillance Support Team.
How long have you been with FDLE total?
Next month will be 12 years.
Now, in July, well, let me ask you this. What were your duties in July, August of 2015, like specifically?
Right. As a Special Agent in the Electronic Surveillance Support Team, I was a member of a statewide unit that provides assistance to local, state, and federal agencies in a variety of areas in the electronic surveillance disciplines. One of the services we provide is the review of call detail records from cellular providers.
Okay. And what education and training did you have at that time to do those specific duties?
I hold a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of West Florida. At that time, I was just shy of 400 hours of specific training relating to cellular technology.
And approximately how many times have you analyzed cell phone records?
Hundreds.
Can you describe the basic process when a cell phone makes a call?
Yeah, so a cell phone is generally a two-way radio, like you had when you were a kid, a walkie-talkie. It's a low-power two-way radio that communicates with a radio tower. So the wireless communication, occurs between the phone and the tower. That's generally the only wireless communication that occurs. After that, the communication events usually carried through wire, sometimes microwave. That's why I said most of the time. But the only wireless part is from you to the tower and from the tower to you. Those records are logged, and those are the records that we review when we're conducting criminal investigations.
Now, does a cell phone typically, I'm not saying all the time, but does it typically use the closest cell tower?
Yes, typically that is the case.
And are there a number of factors that could come into play?
Yes, there are a myriad of factors that could come into play, and that's why we say typically. It's not always the case.
Okay. Now, when a cell phone uses a particular cell tower, does that mean that the cell phone is at the location of that tower?
No, oftentimes it is not the specific location of the tower. It could be, but cell towers are designed in a way to cover an area. So no, not necessarily the tower itself.
And I know you don't know the specific area that a cell tower covers, but can you give a generality?
It depends. Every network is different. So if you have a dense environment like New York City with a lot of people, you're going to have a lot of cell phone towers that cover a smaller geographic footprint. Where if you go out west in the middle of nowhere on an interstate, you may have one tower that services a very large area. So it really depends on the network density, the type of network that you're dealing with.
Okay. Do the cell phone companies keep records of when calls are made, the cell tower used, and things of that nature?
They do.
And do they keep records for incoming and outgoing text messages?
Yes.
And then as law enforcement, are you able to get those cell phone records from the carriers?
Pursuant to court orders, yes.
Okay. And will they provide the cell tower information upon request?
Yes.
Did you receive and review cell records for cell phone number 850-602-7919, and that has been established as Donald Hartung's cell phone?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that pursuant to a court order?
Yes, ma'am.
What was the date and time range that you looked at?
I believe it was July 28th through the 30th of 2015.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 371. You'll just take a look at that and see if you recognize it.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that information for cell phone number 602-7919 from July 28th through July 30th of 2015?
Yes.
Judge, at this time I'd move State's 371 into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor. So admitted.
And permission to publish. So behind you, kind of blurry, but you have the document in front of you. Can you explain what those calls, what they show? Well, first of all, let me start with the time. What does the time on the document say?
So the way these records are provided, and it's hard to see, but on the left side, the third column over,
Let me give you a pointer.
it says CONN time, which is connection time. And these records, the way AT&T provides them, are in UTC. So for this particular time frame, we have to knock 5 hours off. So whatever the time says here, subtract 5 hours for the actual local time for when these communication events occurred.
Okay, so it looks like on July 28th of 2015, there's a call at 14, is that 51?
I believe so. Let me look at
Look at
my
your-
copy, I can see.
right.
Yeah, so subtract 5 hours from that.
Okay, so that would be, help me with the math.
Oh, before lunch, yeah. It would be, it's 5 hours, so 2:51, 1:51, 12:51, 11, 10, 9:51 in the morning.
Okay. And what can you tell us about those two phone calls?
Well, it's the same event, it's the same date and time. There is, in the far right side here, it says cell location, and this is where AT&T provides us the tower information that would service a particular communication event. In this case, it's blank, because there is no tower information for that particular communication event. And you'll notice that also it says F, which means it was forwarded to voicemail. I can't say with certainty that the phone was turned off, but I can say that the phone, for whatever reason, was not communicating with the network at that time.
Okay. But on July 28th of 2015, there is one phone call?
Yeah, essentially, yeah, that's the exact same time. And oftentimes when you see a voicemail record like that, it's double logged on there, so that's common to see that.
Okay. It looks like there are 3 calls, and I can't read that. 3 calls on July 30th, 2015. And
Yep.
actually, the last one shows July 31st, so you have to count back 5 hours?
Correct, yes, all 3 of those calls were on the 30th of July, yes.
Okay. And I actually have that calculated. So the one at 18:14 would actually be 1:14 p.m.?
Correct,
Okay. And then there's one at 18:15, which would be 1:15 p.m.?
yes,
And then the one that shows July 31st at 04:55 is going to be 11:55 p.m. on the 30th.
correct,
Okay.
shortly before midnight.
Okay. So, and did you notice that number is to an 800 number?
Yes, 1-800-432-1000.
Did you call that number?
I did.
And what is that number for?
It's for Bank of America.
Did you also receive cell phone records for cell number 202-603-1223, and for the record, that's been established as Richard's work cell?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that pursuant to a court order?
Yes, ma'am.
And what date and time range did you look at for that cell number?
That one was mid-July through August 1st, 2015.
No objection, Your Honor.
Then, Judge, at this time, I move States 372 into evidence.
So admitted.
So on Richard's cell phone, put that up. And for the record, I'm showing States 372. How many phone calls are there in that 15-day time frame?
6.
Okay. And no calls between July 22nd and July 30th?
Correct.
Okay. And then one incoming call on July 30th?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the call on July 30th is 8 seconds. So what, if anything, can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, there's no tower data for that call. And like I previously stated, I can't say the phone was turned off, but I can say it wasn't communicating with the network for whatever reason. Very brief, 8 seconds. So I could say likely a voicemail.
Okay. And if a phone is turned off, is that a reason that it wouldn't connect to a network?
Yes, ma'am. That would be the primary reason that we don't see phones connecting to the network in this
Okay.
area.
Did you also see cell phone records for 850-356-1714? And for the record, that's been established as Richard's personal cell number.
Yes, ma'am.
No objection, Your Honor.
So this time I move states 373 into evidence.
373 is admitted.
Now, these records are from July 27th through August 1st, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but the court order was for a lengthier time frame, was it not?
Yes, ma'am. Mid-July.
Okay, and mid-July through July 28th of 2015, was there regular activity on this cell phone?
Yes, much more so than the other two phones we just talked about. What I would characterize as normal traffic,
Okay.
frequent traffic.
Now, up to, let me show, and this for the record is page 1, and is that just showing consistent incoming, outgoing records for July 27th, 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then on page 2, same thing? For
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On the last page, when is the last outgoing call for Richard's cell phone?
It's about midway down where it says 35. That's the duration of that phone call.
Can you use the pointer?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Right in here. So July 28th at 6:46, these records are accurate with regards to time. So July 28th at 6:46 was a 35-second outbound call.
And was that to 850-944-4670?
Yes, ma'am.
And after that, were there any more outgoing calls or texts from Richard's cell phone?
No, ma'am.
Did you see a number in there regularly? 850-380-9489.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And is there anything that you can tell us based on your experience for that last outgoing call that was 35 seconds?
That's a short duration call as far as voice communication goes. That's what I can say.
Okay. We can't say someone answered it, didn't answer it.
I can't really say either way on that.
Okay.
I don't have, no.
Right. Then on July 28th, after the last outgoing call at 6:46 p.m., is there an incoming call or incoming either text or call at 8:32
Yes.
from the 380-9489? Sorry.
Mm. Yes. Sorry, I had to.
That's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Lots of numbers.
And I know, I understand. And then on July 29th, 2015, are there 2 inbounds from that same cell number, 380-9489?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then on the 30th, 3 more from that same number?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on July 31st, 4 more inbound?
Inbound calls, yes.
Okay. Now, what is this 9343?
I did some research into that. That's a network message. I can't say exactly what it was, but something akin to, you need more minutes on your phone or something of that nature. I don't know what was communicated, but that's a network message.
Okay. Now, did you look at cell tower locations for the July 28th, 6:46 p.m. Call from that cell phone?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what can you tell the jurors about the cell towers and that phone call?
Well, there were 2 cell towers that were utilized for that 35-second phone call. The first tower is nearby NAS Pensacola. The second tower is in the area of Myrtle Grove, so that's a distance away from there.
Is that a northerly movement?
Yes, ma'am.
Those are all my questions. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to turn that projector off, or?
Mr. Griffin, do you need a reference?
You want it left up?
We have those exhibits.
Yes, sir, I have them.
Look at the first exhibit, if you would. That was on Mr. Hartung's telephone.
Yes, sir.
When was the last call made on that phone?
On this record, July 31st, I'm sorry, July 30th,
and-
correcting for UTC time.
Okay, and on that particular call, where was it? Can you tell what cell tower connected to?
It is listed here. I don't, off the top of my head, know where it is. I could map it, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Do you know that on the 28th, do you have the 28th of July there?
Yes.
Okay, on the 28th of July, were any calls made by Mr. Hartung's cell phone?
No, sir, not on this, no, sir.
Okay. On cell phones, are you able to track someone's location?
My answer would be it depends.
Okay.
But yeah, there are ways, yes.
Well, tell me why it depends. What?
Oh, if the phone is on or off. But
Let's say
there's a
you-
myriad of reasons you can.
Let's say I'm walking around with my cell phone on. Can I be tracked by where I am with that cell phone being on?
A simple answer is yes.
Okay.
It's complicated, but yes.
When I first met you, you gave me an education on this, and I would not try to ask you to explain some of this to me.
Yes, sir.
But you can track someone by virtue of their cell phone, generally.
Yes.
If the cell phone's on.
Yes.
Would you be able to track Mr. Hartung's location at 7 o'clock by virtue of his cell phone? 7 p.m.
What day, what are we talking about?
I'm sorry,
Live
on the
historical?
28th of July 2015 at 7 p.m., can you track Mr. Hartung's location based upon using his cell phone?
No,
Why not?
I don't have the records to support that.
Okay. If you had the records, would you be able to track his location
It depends,
on whether the phone was on?
and what the records reflect.
Okay. How does one go about tracking someone's location? Well, okay, you're doing an investigation on me. You got my cell phone and you want to know where I was July 28th, 2015 at 7 p.m. How does one go about doing that? From a law enforcement perspective.
Right. I would obtain legal process for your cellular provider. They would provide me the records that they have available to them pursuant to the court order. I would review those records, just like we've done here. And I would review it to see if there was any call location data associated with those records.
If the phone were what people call a throwaway phone, would you still be able to do that with that phone?
Yes.
Okay. So law enforcement, based upon the use of a cellular telephone, the numbers can tell where someone was at a specific time if the phone's turned on?
It depends. It depends on if the phone is being utilized as well. It's not just that the phone is on. We have to have records, and that's what I was alluding to, is it depends on what the phone company is able to provide us in the way of records.
Okay. So can you only track someone if the phone is being used? I mean, talking on, or if it's just on?
Historically, we need a communication event with location information attached to the records in order to, and when you say track, in order to generalize where a phone was in a general vicinity, because I don't want to mischaracterize to say that we can put a pinpoint on a phone historically. That's very, very difficult, in most cases impossible. So when we say the word track, general area, general vicinity is what I'm referring to. Just wanted to clear that up.
We can't pinpoint me being in this room at the courthouse.
That would be very difficult historically to do that.
Do you have a new program called Gray Key?
I personally don't. The state of Florida does.
Okay.
Yes.
Does Florida Department of Law Enforcement have it?
Yes.
And what is Gray Key?
I am not tech savvy enough to even describe it. I know it is a forensics tool, is my understanding, and I'm not qualified to speak on it.
Okay. Would that assist in pinpointing a location?
This is, again, my understanding. I'm in administration now. I'm not operational, and that came out after I was in administration. My understanding is that is a tool used for forensic analysis of a phone, not necessarily reviewing records like is what we're doing here today.
Okay.
So I don't know that it would necessarily be a tool in this case. But again, I'm not the expert in gray hair.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are Mr. Hartung's cell phone records from 2015 from AT&T?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there an issue with AT&T back then about GPS locations and things of that nature?
Yes.
Okay, what was that?
Well, they provided, AT&T will provide limited GPS information. It's called a NELOS report. For a very brief time, they allowed us to utilize that information in court. And then they said, hey, it's not accurate enough to be admitted as evidence. So we don't use it anymore. And it's not reliable enough to be used in court, essentially.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you, sir. You can step down.
Thank you.
Say, call your next witness, please.
It was Brad Gordon.
Hello. Raise your right hand, please.
Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give be the true self you got?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Can you state your name, please?
Bradley Gordon,
And Mr. Gordon, what is your date of birth?
4/14/83.
Back in July of 2015, where did you live?
4611 Deerfield Drive.
And back at that time, how long had you lived there?
I lived there since 2007.
Math. 8 years?
That'd be 8 years, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, if I was standing in the front yard of your home facing your home, the house to the right,
Yes.
was that the Smith family, or who you now know to be the Smith
Yes.
family?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, back when you lived on Deerfield Drive, how much did you know about the Smith family?
Very little, if not, I mean, nothing really.
Okay. Did you know any of their names?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Do you know how many people lived there?
2, I believe, an older lady and middle-aged man.
And if it were a mother and 2 sons, did you ever see any of the sons?
I probably have in my years there, but very few and far between.
Okay.
I'd see the heavier set guy maybe once a week at the mailbox, but that's it. And my whole time there, I don't think I ever saw the older lady.
Now, did you ever try to make contact with any of them?
I did when I moved in the neighborhood. I made a bunch of barbecue chicken at one point. I took my neighbor to the left, Mr. Lee Carnley. I took him some, and then I went to that house because I never met the people before. I knocked on the door several times, and I assumed they were home. For some reason, I expected them to answer the door. They never answered the door.
Let me stop you real quick. Why did you assume they were home? Were there cars there?
I believe so.
Okay.
I just, for some reason in my head, I thought they were going to be home. I thought they were home.
Okay.
So,
And you knocked on the door?
I knocked on the door several times. Nobody came to the door. And then I asked my neighbor, Mr. Lee, about
That's okay.
Okay.
Do you know if it was, do you remember if it was during the week or on the weekend?
I don't know exactly, but it was probably during the week because I worked on the weekends mostly.
Okay.
So I wouldn't have really done that if I was working that day.
All right. Did you ever see any of them socializing with any of the other neighbors in your neighborhood?
Never.
Did they seem to keep to themselves?
Most definitely.
Okay. And was that confirmed by the neighbor you were just about to talk about?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. Now, back at that time, did you have any video surveillance at your house?
No, ma'am.
Now, did the Smith family have a neighbor on the other side of them? So
They
in other-
did.
Let me ask you this. If I'm standing in their front yard facing their house, you would be to the left, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then did they have a neighbor to the right?
They did.
All right. Now, were you familiar with the neighbors on the right side?
We would talk every once in a while. They would always be sitting out on the front porch, and when I was back and forth between work and the gym, I'd wave to them. A lot of times I'd go run around the circle of the neighborhood and I waved to them. Had very few conversations with them, but I did see them a lot.
Okay, you saw them a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
And where would you see them a lot?
Sitting on their front porch almost every day.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Those are all my questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Any questions, Mr. Griffith?
Yes, sir. Mr. Gordon, what do you do for a living, sir?
Now,
Let me ask you back then.
back then, I was a route salesman for Frito-Lay.
Okay. And were you, what hours did you work?
I worked in Foley, Alabama. I generally started work at 2 a.m. and I'd probably do a 10 or 12-hour type day, and I'd be home mid-afternoon.
My client is Donald Hartung, who's seated at the table I just left. Did you ever see him at the house?
No, sir.
You said you saw one person pick up the mail maybe one time a week?
Yes,
Is
sir.
that correct? Do you know what time that would have been?
Say early afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock on the regular.
So you didn't see anyone picking up the mail every day, did you?
No, sir.
Did you ever see packages on the front porch of the house?
I saw a UPS or FedEx truck, one of the two, come by on a regular basis. Yes, sir.
And did you ever see packages just stacked up out front?
I can't say for sure.
Okay, that's fine. And when you said the neighbors to the right of the Smith house, does their front porch face the Smith's house?
I don't believe so. I think there's a wall there, and they sit up against the wall, and it faces basically one of the entrances that come from the front of the neighborhood.
So you couldn't easily see next door from where they were sitting?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes.
Any regret?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can sit down. Please call your next witness. Yes. Mhm. Good afternoon, sir. Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give to be the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Will you state your name, please?
George F. Chittenden, Chittenden.
And Mr. Chittenden, what is your date of birth?
May the 5th, 1943.
Where do you live?
Deerfield Drive.
Does anyone live there with you?
My wife.
How long have you lived there?
Since 2004.
Do you work?
I'm retired.
And what are you retired from?
New Orleans Fire.
How long have you been retired?
I'm on a disability from the fire department from 1984.
In July of 2015, as a retiree, were you home most days?
Yes,
And did you and or your wife spend time in your yard, outside?
yes, outside, considerable amount of time outside, yes.
Okay. And where would you typically be outside?
Split between my work area in the rear yard and our front porch.
And how often in a week would you be outside?
Every day,
Even in the July heat?
even in the July heat.
Now, can you describe just the basic layout of your neighborhood?
Deerfield Drive is off of Klondike Road. It is a single entrance area. It is actually a large P-shaped street. The street begins at Klondike, comes down to my residence, which is in the curve, then goes south, which is toward the Gulf, and then turns and goes back east, and then goes north, and that takes you back out to Klondike.
Okay. What is behind your property?
I'm sorry?
What is behind your property?
A couple of 100 acres of woodland.
Now, did you have neighbors next to you on each side?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And as a retiree and being outside quite often, did you pay attention to your neighbors?
The normal amount, yes.
Okay. And if I was standing in your front yard facing your porch, to my left, do you know that to be the Smith family?
Yes.
And did they live there when you moved in 2004?
Yes, they did.
Do you know how many people lived there in July 2015?
3 people.
And do you know the relationship between the three?
A mother and 2 sons.
Do you know their names?
It was the Smith family.
Okay. Do you know their individual names?
There was, the mother was Voncile Smith. There was a brother by the name of R.T. Smith and a brother by the name of John Smith.
And do you know if one of the sons of Voncile was special needs?
Yes,
And which one was that?
that would have been John.
Did you ever see John drive?
No, ma'am, I did not.
Did you see the other son drive?
That would be R.T.?
Yes.
Yes.
And what type of car did he drive?
He drove a white Toyota SUV. I think it might have been a Highlander,
Okay.
but he also alternated and drove the tan SUV, and it might have been a RAV maybe or something. I'm not sure which one that was.
Okay. Did you notice if RT had a regular schedule Monday through Friday? I'm talking about your observations.
Well, he would leave for work in the morning and come back at various times.
Okay.
I'm not sure that there was a really strict schedule.
Now, in the 10 plus years that you lived there in 2015, How many times did you see the mother, Voncile Smith?
Twice. I mean, I saw her twice, personally twice, I mean, not socially, but, you know, I think maybe I saw her one additional time on the back porch.
Okay. And what were the circumstances when you saw her twice?
Mr. Smith Sr., the elder Mr. Smith, was infirm, relatively infirm. He had a new John Deere lawnmower, riding lawnmower, and he really was not capable of operating the machine.
Okay.
And one time he was in his backyard and he was trapped on the machine and laying over and going in circles. So I went over and got him, picked him up off, brought him to the front door and knocked on the door, and she came to the door.
Okay.
And I presented him, and that was the first time.
Okay.
The second time, similar situation, but it was the front yard. The tractor got tangled in the hose and started to turn over. I did the same thing, same result.
Okay. How often did you see John Smith?
Usually daily.
And what would he be doing when you saw John?
Well, sometime he would be going to work with R.T. Smith and coming home. On Tuesdays, he would be home most Tuesdays he would be home. He would bring in the garbage cans, get the mail, and that kind of thing.
Okay. Did you see or speak with RT very often?
I spoke with him twice.
Okay. And was that in regards to his father?
That was in regards to his father being in peril on the lawnmower.
Okay. Now, were any of the Smiths, Voncile, Richard, or John, were any of them social?
No.
Did they have any animals that you saw?
Yes. They originally had a small poodle-like dog, and that dog disappeared. The woodlands behind us had predators, and apparently he was predated in the woods, or she. And then they got another dog, which was a terrier. I think it was a Highland terrier.
Can you describe the Highland Terrier?
White dog, about 18 inches long, long hair.
Do you know its name? Did you know its name?
I'm sorry?
Did you know its name?
A bear.
Now, how many doors did the Smith family have, if you know?
There were 3 doors in the residence.
Okay. Where were they?
There was a front door, there was a side door, entry off of the driveway, and there was a door that you entered from the back porch.
Okay. And from what you could see, which door did the Smith family typically use to come and go?
The rear door, off the back porch.
Okay. Did you see anyone use any other doors?
Rarely I saw RT and John use the side door.
Okay, and what would you see them do over there?
That was typically when they were bringing groceries into that side room, I suppose it was. Cases of water and soft drinks and that kind of thing, unloading from the car to that door.
Okay. Did you see any outside visitors come to the Smith home?
Social visitors?
Any visitors?
No, the only people I ever saw come to the house were Rocky's Pest Control and Hamrick Air Conditioning.
Okay. Did you see any regular visitors that came to the Smith house?
No, ma'am. I did not see any regular visitors at all.
What about this man seated over here at the table in the suit with the blue tie?
Yes,
Okay. And who do you know that to be?
that's Voncile's son, one of the sons. Yes, it's just one of her sons.
Okay. Do you know his name?
Donald Wayne Hartung.
Now, how did you come to know that he was Voncile's son?
The morning of the description of the incident was the first time conclusively that I knew that. We may have heard it from the neighborhood or something, but nothing conclusive, and we didn't really know until that time.
Okay. Now, because of his size, did that give you any indication of a relationship?
We thought he was related, but Mr. Smith Sr. was not a person of great height at all.
Okay. What about RT?
Yes, very large man,
And what about John?
very large man.
Okay. Now, would you see Donald Hartung, who you now know as Donald Hartung, would you see him go over to the Smith family house pretty regularly?
On Tuesdays,
Okay. And how
don't-
would he get there?
he would drive.
Okay. And what did he drive?
He drove a late model Lincoln Town car, white over blue.
Anything else you noticed about his car?
It had significant damage on the right rear quarter panel.
Now, from your porch, if you were sitting on your porch, could you see people coming and going to the Smith home?
Yes, if they were approaching my home on Deerfield Drive from Klondike, you could see them about 600 or 700 feet away. And then, of course, they would come around the turn, past my property, and then the brick wall was there, so you could usually see if they were going to that residence because they would put the brake lights on.
Okay.
But past that, I couldn't see.
Unless you stood up from your porch and kind of looked.
That's unless I stood up and actually went to the porch and looked.
Okay. Now, when you would see Mr. Hartung come over in his car, would you see him come with anyone or anything?
Yes, he had, usually on a Tuesday, he had a boxer type dog that would sit in the passenger seat. It was a brindle colored boxer.
Okay. And do you know how long Mr. Hartung had been coming over to that home on Tuesdays?
As long as I can remember, he used to come on Tuesday.
Okay.
Ma'am, is it possible to turn that light is right in on the
Oh,
projector?
I'm so
It's,
sorry.
it's right in my eye.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies. What time on Tuesdays would you typically see Mr. Hartung go to the Smith residence?
Usually early afternoon after lunch.
And do you know how long he would typically stay? And I'm not saying it's exact, but just typically.
Late afternoon.
Now, if you were in your backyard, I think you said you had a work area back there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And if you were in your backyard, could you see Mr. Hartung if he was on the back porch?
Yes.
Okay, and how? Like, how were you able to see?
There was a chain link fence. It was, the houses were not that far apart. It was fairly easy.
Okay. And what types of things would you see him do if he was on the back porch?
He would come out, smoke a cigarette. Usually when he came early on, he would come out, smoke a cigarette, and then go back in, and then, the next time or so, he would come out and play with the dog, smoke a cigarette, play with the dog in the yard.
Okay. His dog or Bear?
His dog. I never saw Bear and his dog in the yard at the same time.
And how often would you typically see him smoke cigarettes on Tuesdays?
About every 30 minutes, plus or minus. It was pretty regular.
Okay. Now, did Mr. Hartung normally have his dog on Tuesdays?
Yes.
Do you remember the day that police, fire department, EMS came to the Smith house?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you home that day?
Yes, I was.
And do you remember the date itself?
It was July the 31st, it's Friday morning.
Prior to that Friday, July 31st, when was the last time you had seen Donald Hartung at the Smith home?
On Tuesday of that week.
And did you actually see him arrive at the Smith home?
I saw him arrive coming down Deerfield and turning in front of my house.
And on Tuesday, the 28th, do you remember approximately what time he got to the house that day?
It was early afternoon. I cannot tell you an exact time because I don't wear a watch.
Why don't you wear a watch?
During my time in the fire department, I carried 2 radios, 2 pagers, and 2 watches. Subsequently, when we went into the wedding business, weddings are a timed situation, and we carried phones, 4 watches, just lots of time and communication devices, because we hired a large number of musicians, and when we retired, we said, no more phones, no more radios, no more watches, and that was that.
I got you. Okay, so you saw him arrive early afternoon on the 28th. Was he driving the same car he always did?
The Lincoln Town Car.
Okay. And did you see his dog in the car on July 28th?
I did not see the dog in the car.
Where did Mr. Hartung that you saw, where did he typically park his car?
He would park to the Deerfield Drive side of the large oak tree that was between our 2 homes, and actually parked on my property.
And when you saw him coming into the neighborhood in front of your house, you didn't see the dog, but did you actually see him? Like, did you see his face?
Mr. Hartung?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you see him smoke cigarettes on that Tuesday, July 28th?
I saw him smoke 2 cigarettes. He came out on the back porch briefly and smoked 2 cigarettes at separate times early.
Okay. Did you see him come out and smoke that day like he normally did?
Yes.
Okay. So every 20 to 30 minutes or so?
Yes, about that, yes.
Did you see his dog in the yard on July 28th?
I did not see the dog in the yard on the 28th.
Now, do you remember what you were doing that day that maybe kind of helps you remember all these details?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that?
My wife had gotten me a new tool chest. Kubota tractors have lots of sockets. because they use both SAE and metric sockets. And I had been keeping him in a gray bus tub, or several gray bus tubs, and she took pity on me and got me a new toolbox, tool chest with socket organizers. And I came out and I was organizing my sockets and keeping an inventory on the sockets to put them into the tool chest.
Okay. And where you were working or inventorying your sockets, could you see into the Smith backyard?
Yes, I actually had to move the tool chest to the south side of the property, which is closest to theirs, under my lean-to, because the light was better. The sunlight was better there. And yes, I have a direct view.
Okay. Did you see Mr. Hartung leave the Smith family home on July 28th?
Yes, I did.
And I know you're watchless at that time, but do you remember approximately what time it was?
Twilight.
Okay. And can you tell us what twilight is?
Well, it's once the sun sets, so to speak, but it is still light enough. There's no harsh shadows, but light enough to carry on normal business.
Do you remember when sunset was back then?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember when sunset was back then?
I think it was about 7:40, 46 or somewhere in there.
Where were you physically located when you saw Mr. Hartung leave the Smith home?
I was actually exiting the door of the house to go sit on the porch. And as I opened the door and began to walk out, I saw Mr. Hartung's automobile and Mr. Hartung just passing the brick column on my front porch and going north, and then turning and going up toward Klondike, which would be east.
Okay. And you said this was around twilight?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, at any point that same day, July 28th, did you see Richard come into the neighborhood?
Yes.
And what was he driving?
He was driving the white Toyota.
And where did you first see him and where were you?
I was on the porch, and I saw him as he approached from Klondike on Deerfield, about 600 feet away.
Okay. Now, did you actually see RT? Like, did you see his face or just his car?
Yes, because of the position of my property, when people come up over there's a rise there in the street. When they come up over the rise, you can see their face, and you know, and of course as they get closer, they have to slow for the turn, and then you can see much better. And yes, you can recognize anybody.
Okay. And was RT by himself or was he with anybody?
He was by himself.
Okay. Did you see RT that day on the 28th before or after you saw Donald Hartung leave the residence?
It was before Mr. Hartung left the residence.
How or why do you remember that?
It's just sequence of events.
Okay. And what was the sequence of events on the 28th?
I actually saw RT leave for work. My dressing room looks out onto their driveway. But then, like I said, early afternoon, I saw Mr. Hartung arrive. And then later on, I saw RT come home, and then I saw Mr. Hartung leave.
Now, was it normal or abnormal to see RT come home while Hartung was still at the house?
It was not usual. Usually, Mr. Hartung was gone before RT came home.
I'm going to ask you one of those pesky time questions again, but do you remember how long after you saw RT come home that Donald Hartung left?
I cannot tell you in the number of minutes, but I can tell you what I did. Mr. RT came home. I gathered up some reading material I had on the porch. Went in, my wife was in the process of getting ready to cook dinner. I asked her, did she need any assistance? And I was having some serious foot pain. I went and changed shoes, did a few other chores, went back and assisted my wife with dinner preparations. And I was having a hard time with my foot, and I told her, and I needed to sit down, and that's when I went out, and as I did, I saw Mr. Hartung leaving.
Okay, when you say you went out to your front porch?
Out to my front porch.
Okay. As you saw him drive, I guess, in front of your home and then toward Klondike,
Yes.
did he seem to be driving any faster or slower than normal?
No, it was the normal speed that he usually drove.
Okay. And when you saw Mr. Hartung leave on July 28th, did you see his dog in the car?
I did not see the dog in the car.
Now, once RT came home and Hartung left on that Tuesday, did you see anyone at the Smith home until police arrived on July 31st?
No, I did not see anyone at the home.
Were you and your wife home those 3 days before police arrived?
Yes, we were home.
Did you hear anything unusual at the Smith home?
No,
Did you
I
see anyone pull up to the house?
no, there was no activity whatsoever.
Now, you said that you have a window that faces the Smith residence, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And back then, did you have your window open or closed?
It was open. Our air conditioner was not working.
And would you be able to hear from that window if cars pulled up or left or?
Yes, it's pretty obvious.
Okay. Are you a light sleeper or a heavy sleeper?
I'm a light sleeper.
And back at that time, did you have a set time that you went to bed or?
No, usually, it's from my fire department years, I went to bed pretty late.
From that Tuesday until that Friday, did you see anything out of the ordinary at the Smith home?
No, there was nothing out of the ordinary.
After you saw Richard, or RT as you call him, come home that Tuesday, did you see his white SUV move or leave the parking spot?
It did not move.
And did you notice anything about his car, how it was parked?
Yes.
Okay, what did you notice?
Well, at first, when I looked out the window, I thought there was something that looked unusual, odd. And at first I couldn't pin it down. And then it finally dawned on me that the car was parked so I could see the side of the vehicle, which was something that I had never seen before. He did not park the car at an angle. He was compulsive about backing the car up and nosing it directly in toward the house. And both automobiles were very precisely placed, pointing at the house.
Okay. Were you home the morning of Friday, July 31st, when the police came?
Yes, I was.
I think I already asked you that, I'm sorry. And when the police arrived, did you walk next door?
Yes, but it wasn't the police department.
It was Hal McCord?
It was Hal McCord from Homeland Security.
Okay. Now, at some point that same morning, did you see Donald Hartung arrive after the police got there?
Yes,
Did you talk to him?
yes.
And describe for the jurors what his, just what his demeanor was.
Detached, unconcerned.
And at any point, did you kind of stay in the driveway area of the home?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And at some point, did some of the emergency responders come out and make comments about what was going on in the house?
Yes, a sheriff's officer came out of the gate, and do you want me to say what he said? The
Sure.
comment? He's
Approach.
Okay. You can answer.
as he exited the gate, apparently somebody had asked him how it was, and he said, "It's bad, it's very bad."
Okay. And was Mr. Hartung standing near you when that comment was made?
Yes,
Okay. And what was his reaction or response?
none that I could determine.
Now, was it Mr. Hartung that had asked what had happened in there?
No,
Okay. Did you see the Smith, the dog, I think Bear, right? Bear?
yes,
Okay. Did you see the dog that morning?
yes. At some point, the sheriffs apparently let the dog out of the house. The dog came to the gate, the entry gate, and someone had left the gate ajar, and the dog came out and kind of made a circle and then attempted to get back into the backyard, and a sheriff's deputy picked up the dog.
Okay. And then what happened with the dog?
He gave the dog to Mr. Hartung.
All right. And did you see anything unusual on the dog? Any blood or anything of that nature?
By the time that we actually got, that we saw the dog up close, we had to move to the street in front of my house next to Mr. Hartung's automobile. And Mr. Hartung brought the dog out. He was holding the dog with the dog's back to his chest, and his tummy was out, and his paws and his muzzle face were pointing out. And I looked at the dog because I expected the dog to show some sign of blood. And I looked carefully at the dog, at the muzzle, the paws, the webs, and hair on the feet, and I did not see anything that indicated it would be blood.
May approach the witness.
Yes, you may.
No objection to the photos, Your Honor.
Judge, this time I would move states 374 and 375 in evidence.
So admitted.
It's going to go behind. And this is going to go right back in your eyes. All right, Mr. Chinden, I am showing you State's Exhibit 374. Can you show the jurors where your home is?
This residence right here,
And where's the Smith home?
this residence here,
Where's your front porch?
right there.
Okay, and where is the area where you would see Mr. Hartung park his car?
Right there.
Okay. And this is State's Exhibit 375, and could you just kind of orient us to what we're looking at here?
You're looking north on Deerfield Drive. You're standing apparently in front of the Smith residence, which would be over here. And this is my residence, and on this side would be Lemuel Hornsby's residence.
Okay, and is this the turn?
The turn, this is Deerfield Drive approaching my residence, and this is the turn.
Okay, and the early afternoon when you saw Mr. Hartung on July 28th, can you describe the direction that you saw him come from?
He came driving toward the west, which would be from Klondike toward this direction.
Okay, and then which direction did you see RT come home from?
The exact same direction. He would come in this way and pass my residence.
Okay, and then was that the same direction that you saw Mr. Hartung leave, but obviously opposite?
Yes, he would have come out of this driveway and proceeded here around the turn and then on out Deerfield to Klondike.
Okay, and at this angle, can you show the jurors again where he would typically park his car, he meaning Mr. Hartung?
Between this oak tree here and this oak tree, usually in this spot right here.
Okay, and again, where's your porch on that picture?
It's obscured by the tree, but it's in that area there.
Okay. Did you see where the Smiths kept their outside trash cans?
The garbage cans?
Yes.
Yes.
And where was that?
They usually kept the garbage cans behind the chain link fence between the double driveway gate and the single entry gate.
Okay. And did you see the Smiths take trash out to those trash cans?
Yes.
Okay. How often? Did they have a lot of trash or a little trash?
They had a considerable amount of trash.
And why do you say considerable?
Well, they received a lot of packages, UPS stuff, and on garbage days, the cans would be so full that the wind would blow and it would wind up on my lawn.
Okay. All right. What day was trash pickup on Deerfield Drive in July 2015?
Tuesdays.
And did it come once a week?
Yes, once a week on a Tuesday.
Okay. You said earlier that you would see John get the trash can from the road sometimes.
Yes.
Okay. Did you see him get the trash on that Tuesday, July 28th?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember approximately what time it was?
It was late morning, before lunch.
Okay. Was it before or after you saw Mr. Hartung arrive at the Smith home?
It was before.
After that Tuesday, July 28th, when you saw John get the trash can from the road, garbage can, I think you called it, did you ever see John again get the mail, get packages, anything?
No, I did not.
After you saw RT on July 28th, 2015, did you ever see him come and go either in his car or his mom's car?
I did not.
Did you see any activity of the Smiths whatsoever until they were found on Friday the 31st?
No activity.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chittenden.
Griffith?
Please report. Good afternoon, Mr. Chittenden.
Good afternoon.
I believe we met a couple years ago.
Anchor Court reporting, yes.
I'm going to ask you a few questions. The picture that Ms. Jensen introduced to you about your home, was that a picture that is that a current picture, or was that the picture from a while ago? Let me rephrase it, make it maybe easier. The picture, does that depict how your home looked on July 28th, 2015?
There is a difference, and it's very difficult for me to tell from this picture. This picture is after, considerably after that date, because the fence has been moved.
Where was it moved?
It was moved forward. And this one, I cannot tell because of the angle exactly whether the fence is in the original position or the new position. The perspective is difficult to determine there.
Okay. So you had the chain link fence at the Smith's house was there, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The chain link fence at the Smith house was there,
Yes,
is
sir,
that not
it
correct?
was. Yes.
And you have a fence around your yard?
We have a board fence
Okay.
that goes from the chain link fence to our house on that side, and that side only, actually.
Okay. So between you and the Smiths?
That is correct, sir.
And your front porch is the same location now that
Yes.
it was then?
Yes, it
So
is.
that hasn't changed at all?
No, it has not.
Now, you said that on the 28th of July of 2015, that you saw John bring the garbage cans in.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And that was after the trash had been emptied?
Yes.
Now, you, on that day, spoke with the investigators, did you not?
We spoke briefly with one investigator, I believe, yes.
And then subsequently, you contacted the sheriff's department and had another meeting with the sheriff's department?
That is correct.
Correct? How long after the 28th was that?
The
The
second.
second meeting, yes, sir.
That would have been at the end of September, I believe, or about the last week of September.
After the 28th, how often, if at all, did you see anyone at, up until September, let's say, did you see people at the Smith residence?
After the 31st,
Right. We know that law enforcement was there for a few days.
that's correct.
And then after that, did the house just remain vacant?
The probate people came, family members came, once the police had released the property and taken down the crime scene tape. Family members arrived, and they came to the property, and the probate attorney and his paralegal, I believe, came to the property.
Okay. Did you see Mr. Hartung at the property?
Yes,
How many times?
quite a few times. I can't tell you the exact number, but it was quite a few times.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is you're pretty accurate about everything else, so. Do you know how many times Mr. Hartung was there, or just a few times?
Trying to come up with a number for you.
Well, I mean, if you can't, that's okay.
Yeah, it was, I'd say it's probably more than 10.
Okay. And was he with the relatives when he came over?
Usually, I think a few times he came by himself.
Okay. And did you see anyone else come over there?
There were, the probate people were contacting cleaning agencies to attempt to clean the residence.
Okay. Did you see any locksmiths over there?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Anyone else?
Immediately afterwards, it was fairly busy, but I didn't make notes of who was there, but it was fairly busy.
And were you able to see over there and who were there from your kitchen window?
Not from my kitchen, no, sir, from dressing room.
Okay.
The kitchen is on the other side of the house.
On the side of the house by where the Smiths are,
Yes.
what is on your side of the house? Is that where your bedroom is?
No, that's my dressing room and my wife's dressing room.
When you said at one point during the day you went inside to change shoes,
That is correct.
and when was that?
After I had been working on the sockets in the lean-to, my foot was hurting a lot, and I went inside and changed my shoes. Then later on, after I had been reading on the front porch, I went back inside, changed shoes again because it seems to help my foot.
Okay. So a couple different times you went back into the into where you couldn't see the Smith house.
Well, if I'm on the porch, I cannot see directly to the Smith's house, but in my dressing room, it looks right out at their property.
And all your windows were open?
Yes, my air conditioner was not working.
And is your bedroom next to the your dressing room?
There's my dressing room was in the front, then my wife's dressing room was next to that, and then at the end of the hallway was the master bedroom, which does not look out on the Smith residence.
Okay. Now, I take it because it was so hot, all the windows were open at the house?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Now, when Mr. Hartung would visit, you said that he would park by those trees. Is that correct?
Yes, he would.
Was that so someone else could pull in the driveway and park?
I don't know why he did it.
Well, it left room for someone to pull in the
Yes, it
driveway
did.
and park. So Richard could have pulled in the driveway and parked. He wasn't blocking Richard's parking space.
No, he was not.
Now, you said you don't keep a watch.
No.
Do you have a clock in the kitchen, or have you banished all clocks from the home?
At that time, we had a clock radio in the bedroom, which we used as an alarm clock for things like doctor's appointments and so on, but we did not have clocks in most of the house.
Okay. What time did, you said sometime in the afternoon, Mr. Hartung arrived, but you can't tell us when.
It was after lunch, early afternoon.
Okay. And you said that he left before dark, is that right?
At twilight, yes, sir.
Well, originally when I asked you, you said that he left in early evening.
Yes,
And then you said it was before dark.
that's correct.
And you said maybe twilight, early twilight, maybe.
Yes,
So it was just sometime at the end, towards the end of the day.
that's correct. It was still light outside.
Okay. When you said that when Richard came home, he didn't park as he normally did,
That's correct.
but you saw him driving down Deerfield
Coming
towards your house.
toward the house, yes, I did.
Was he driving at a regular rate of speed?
He was driving a little bit faster than he normally did.
Was he racing?
No,
Was he driving in a way that concerned you or caused you any concern?
no.
Now, you said that you had seen John, I think that day, get the mail.
I saw him bring the garbage cans in.
Did you see him get the mail?
I did not see him get the mail that I can remember, no.
Okay. Did you ever see him get the mail?
Yes, he would get the mail usually.
Would he get the mail on Tuesdays when he was at home?
Usually, yes.
And when he was at work, he obviously didn't get the mail
That's
then.
correct.
Do you know who got the mail when John was working?
The mailbox is situated across the street from the residence, and sometimes they would pull up to the mailbox and could reach it from the RT would pull up and could reach it from there. Other times they would come out, RT or John. Usually John would come out later after he got home and get the mail.
So it wasn't always in the evening? I mean, in the afternoon?
No, it was various times.
When Mr. Hartung went over there, did you ever speak with him?
No,
You said that he usually had his dog with him,
he usually had his dog with him, yes, sir.
but you didn't see the dog that day.
I did not see the dog that day.
And that day, you apparently were paying attention to the Smith house, or you saw a lot of things going on at the Smith house that day?
Well, because of the angle that I was at in the lean-to doing my sockets, I was facing the back porch of the residence. But there wasn't a lot of activity. I only saw Mr. Hartung come out twice.
Okay. Did you hear a gunshot?
No, I did not.
And all your windows were open?
That is correct.
And during the time prior to when you said you heard you saw Mr. Hartung leave, you were on the side of the house where you could see that house, right?
Yes, I was doing the socket inventory, saw him come out twice, and then I went inside to change shoes and go to the front porch.
And you can hear over to the Smith's house from your front porch. You could hear any commotion going on.
Yes, I should be able to, yes.
And at least until Mr. Hartung left, you never heard a gunshot. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what time do you usually go to bed? Well, I know you don't have a clock, but ballpark it for me.
It's not necessarily a usual time. It can vary, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 11:30. Stay up pretty late.
Okay. And do you know if anyone ever came back to the Smith's house that night or in any evening after Mr. Hartung left?
I did not observe anyone at the house.
Okay. And late night, do you know?
Because the windows would have been open, it's any activity in the driveway, vehicles, motors running, you can hear it. But no, there was
But-
nothing.
But you could hear a motor running, but you couldn't hear a gunshot?
I did not hear a gunshot, but anybody who would have driven into the driveway, you can hear.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any redirect?
Can you just explain what your definition of twilight is, please?
Well, I know, I used to do cinematography, and twilight is when the sun sets but is still at least 6 degrees above the 6 degrees below the horizon. And it's what photographers call the magic hour, or the sweet light. It's no harsh shadows. It's like a lighted room, basically, and you can carry on normal business operations in that light.
But is the sun starting to go down?
I'm sorry?
Is the sun starting to go down?
That is correct. The sun
But
is,
it's still light enough?
it is still light.
To see?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask one follow-up question? I don't have to bring Mr. Chipman back, Judge.
Yes.
Do you know what, I'm sorry, let me approach the lectern, that's rude. Mr. Chittenden, on the 31st of July, that's the day that the law enforcement came to the
Yes.
house. Do you know what time they locked down the crime scene and everybody left?
Everybody left, you
Yes,
mean
sir.
completely?
Yes, sir.
It was very late in the evening. It was, I'm saying it's probably well after 9 o'clock, I would imagine. It was very late,
9, 10 o'clock?
at least.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Jensen, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. You can step down. All right, Ms. Jensen, that'll wrap up for today.
Yes, sir.
All right, members of the jury, let me also remind you, I told you early on, if there's anything you needed to let me know. I know there was one instance where one member of the jury smoked and had to go outside, and all the jurors went with them, which seemed to be kind of an inconvenience. That's the kind of things I'm talking about. If there's anything we're doing that you think is an inconvenience or could be improved to help your stay, that's what I want to know, okay? Okay. And you've got your notepad. All right, let me remind you not to view, listen to, discuss, or in any other way come into contact with information regarding this case. And with our thanks and appreciation again, you're excused for the evening. Please be back at 8:45. Please be seated. Anything else to address before we adjourn for the evening?
No, sir.
All right, we're adjourned. See y'all tomorrow morning at 8:45, good enough?